Hello, hello, and welcome to Temple of the False Spot, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
This is episode 84.
Yep.
74. Getting ahead of myself. Season 8, episode 74.
There we go.
I just wanted to talk about my Prismari deck, but this isn't a deck tale. That was last week.
Yeah.
So, we were discussing before we started recording. This deck, Galazeth Prismari, we've done an episode about.
We have.
He's a 4 mana, red, blue, 2 mana, two generic. Why am I having such a hard time saying these words? He's red, blue, 2. He's a 3/4 flyer. Elder Dragon, legendary creature. When Galazeth Prismari enters the battlefield, create a treasure token. Artifacts you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana to cast an instant or sorcery spell. If you listened to our previous episode about this deck, you know what this deck's about. If not, let me give a quick recap. It likes to make a lot of treasures. Pretty simple. Also, it utilizes non-treasure artifacts to also make mana. There is an artifact, theme with an artifact creature sub-theme. There's some mirror generators. I guess off the bat, those artifact creatures generally don't have haste unless I have Brutacloud out, so you can't tap them right away for mana because they are creatures. But why I bring it up is because this deck loves big spells.
Yeah, not really a big surprise there, given the context of the card and what we're looking at. I'm guessing it loves big instants and sorceries.
Oh, yes.
The kind of spells that it probably likes.
Almost exclusively.
Well, that would stand to reason, given the commander.
I've had games with this deck where I've had things like Wizard Spellbook pop off, where you tap it, exile an instant or sorcery from your graveyard, roll a d20, and then do what it says. Copies it essentially from your graveyard, or it exiles it and then it makes a copy. You can either pay it for its cost, or cheaper, or free. Right. It's cool stuff, but then you've got things like Jaya's Immolating Inferno, and what's the other one? The big red, Crackle with Power. Yeah. Both which are X spells.
Right.
Jaya's Immolating Inferno is red X. Jaya's Immolating, it's a legendary sorcery, so you have to have a legendary creature or planeswalker on the battlefield to play it. And it deals X damage up to 3 targets. Handy,
considering most games you have 3 opponents.
Exactly.
It was like this card was built for Commander games. No, it wasn't even like that. It is that.
Yeah, it's not excellent in limited formats. Crackle. I mean, I guess in its own limited format, it came out in Dominaria, which there was a legendary creature in every pack, and therefore you have higher chances of having a red-based legendary creature in your deck. But obviously, highly playable in Commander. Crackle with Power, on the other hand, is red XXX. So 3 X's. Crackle with Power deals 5 times X damage of up to X targets. If you have never seen this card, X at 1, so the spell costs 2/2, or red 3. It deals 5 damage to 1 target. X is 2. It's 8 mana, so then deals 10 damage to 2 targets, etc., etc. If you go above, say, where X, you really only need X to be what, if you have X being 3, it deals 15 damage to 3 targets.
Right.
For 11 mana.
Right. Now, normally you would look at that and say, okay, well, that's cute, 11 mana, though. But with this deck, you're going to... 11 mana is not a real issue.
Right. So, the normal restriction with this is, 11 mana is a lot of mana. That's very late game type of things, which in this deck it can be as well. But between the amount of treasure it pumps out through things like Gold Vein Pick, where whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure. That's just 1. If you give it double strike, it makes 2, and it's an artifact. So that's 3 mana already. Things like Malcolm, whenever 1 or more pirates deals just any damage to an opponent, create a treasure. You've got all these things that make treasure. You've got Togo, which is essentially landfall, make a rock, which is an artifact, which you can tap 4 mana. And so this deck really does do 2 things. It creates treasure or artifacts / big mana, and it plays a lot of doubling / copying spells.
Which is also a nice way to really make the big spells count for a whole lot more.
Oh, absolutely.
By just paying the doubling costs.
So. So like things like Teach by Example is hybrid red-blue, instant. When you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Very cool. Very much...
Nice fork.
But you got to play it before.
Right.
And you're kind of then broadcasting to the rest of the table what you're about to do. You're about to do something big. You put in X = 2, so you could do 10 damage to 2 targets. But with Teach by Example, for 2 extra mana, you are doing 10 damage to 4 targets, or 20 damage to 1 target and 10 to 2 others, etc., etc.
Right.
And this becomes unwieldy very quickly. But in terms of like when does your opponent respond? Do they respond to the copy? Do they respond to the Crackle with Power cast? I mean, with the Crackle with Power cast, you choose the targets and then they can counter it. But if you have a copy coming up, then like that copy also goes on the stack, and then they have to counter it, essentially both of them, for it to fully be neutralized.
So you're describing a direct damage deck that has some resilience. Yes. All right. So what's the problem?
I don't know. The problem for me is that it does that one thing. I've played Crackle with Power. I've won through this deck with Crackle with Power on more than one occasion. Right. Which is a lot of fun. So therefore I don't want to take it out. Yeah. But it does bring up this question to me of like, what more can this deck do? Do I just wait until Crackle with Power? Do I like pump all my mana into my draw spells like Blue Sun Zenith, or what's the other one that I have in here? I don't even know if I have Blue Sun Zenith in here. Ingenious Mastery, or like any sort of X draw spell type of thing? Or do I just wait for it to come out? Or do I put in, like, how do I, quote unquote, fix the deck so that it's not so, like, I don't know, out of nowhere, which, I mean, this is the type of deck that's going to be out of nowhere. But also B, like, how do I add in something else? Right. Almost to a point where, how do I add in a way for my opponents to be able to interact a bit more?
Right. Now, to be fair, I mean, you say out of nowhere. Yeah. What you're saying is it can win by playing one card, and it wins right away. Yeah. Because this isn't out of nowhere. I mean, realistically, you have Galazeth in play. You have a bunch of artifacts. Yeah. And honestly, if you've got a handful of treasures plus some other artifacts and Galazeth out, that's kind of the warning beacon to everybody else on the board that the next thing that happens is not going to be comfortable for everyone else. So, you know, that you are now in the position where you're looking to do serious big things.
Yeah. And, like, there have been plenty of times, too, where I've gotten to mid-game and I've got things like Double Vision or what's the one with the bird?
Sunbird's Invocation.
Sunbird's Invocation. Thank you.
Wow, that only took him.
Sunbird's Invocation is 6 mana enchantment. So, like,
Right.
takes a while to get there, especially for an enchantment. You can't really use Prismari as you'd want to play it. But it says whenever you cast a spell from your hand, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is that spell's mana value. You may cast a spell with mana value X or less from cards among the, revealed this way without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's kind of like Cascade without the exile, and you only look at the top X cards. The reason I took that out is mostly because it just it eats time. It eats up as much time as it took for us to figure out the name of that card. But, I mean, you even look at things like, I've got Double Vision in here, which is a high-costed thing that says whenever you... it's 5 mana for an enchantment, again. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, copy it for free, which is great. It's very cool.
Right.
Especially if that first spell is a copy spell.
Right.
Then you've got things like Mind's Desire in here, which I may take out because I have a critical mass of X spells.
Right, and you also have blue.
Yeah.
Mind's Desire, maybe not as essential as it might be.
Right.
But, I look at it, and for us in our meta is very creature oriented. Most of the decks win through creature combat, and I think a lot of the decks really don't, or have a very difficult time interacting with a deck that wins by casting sorceries and instants, especially X spells, because you stop an X spell by countering it. That's really the only way. You have to be able to counter it. Once it's cast, you need a counter, and not a lot of decks run counters. And you can tell me all the decks that run counters, but if you're not blue, not a lot of decks run counters. And even if you are blue, anybody who's listened to the podcast knows I am not a fan of counter spells in multiplayer Magic. They're just too focused. Too many times you're going after or you're countering something that may or may not hurt you because you don't know if it's coming at you.
Right.
And if all you're doing is holding your counter spells for just these X spells, then you're running a lot of counters for no reason at all because they're just not going to come up very often, especially in our meta. So how does a meta like ours, which has some counters, stop this other than sitting on those counters until this happens? And you're running more sorceries and instants to do the damage than most of our decks are running counters to stop it.
Right.
So if you're at the point where you can cast this stuff, then the group has to make it so that you're not at that point. Too many times you determine who the leader is by what's on the battlefield. And somebody's got, in our group, somebody has 4 or 5 creatures on the board. They've put themselves into a threatening position where they can attack. Okay, then they're seen as the primary threat. Whereas if Andy's sitting there with just his legend out, maybe there's a blocker, another blocker in addition, and 12 artifacts, somehow you're not seen as the primary threat. And that's not a fault of your deck. That's a problem with the group reading the table.
Right. Especially where, like, I mean, I've played this deck enough that, like, people understand how it works.
Right.
They should understand that they should be seen as lands, the artifacts.
Right.
And it's interesting because it's definitely a deck that I bring out and I understand that I should be like the arch enemy. Like, it should be generally at least mid-game on an arch enemy game.
With this particular deck, when you get to 10 mana, 12 mana, you have to be considered the primary target.
Right.
Other decks in our games can get to 14, 16, hell, they can get to 20 mana. They're not in a position where the next card can win the game. It's always going to be a case of, I'm going to take that 20 mana and cast some creatures or do something else that will then create a position where I'm in power. And our group needs to move. We need to adjust how we read the table for that. However, it's not as though that this is all lost. As anybody who doesn't play a lot of counterspells knows, if I can't stop your sorcery that wins the game, then I have to stop your ability to cast it. And most every deck can do this. Get rid of the artifacts. It used to be a case where you could pick and choose which artifact needs to go. This artifact is threatening. It needs to be destroyed. Everybody is running artifacts. Tons of them. Treasure is huge in the format right now, in virtually every single meta, whether it's a Smothering Tithe or a Treasure Nabber or
what is it, Bronze Dragon, the new one?
Right.
It's insane.
Anything.
No, Copper Dragon. I don't know.
Anything. They're all churning out a ton of treasure. And if it's not a treasure, then it's gold, or it's a clue, or it's food, or it's an artifact creature, or it's a copy that's an artifact.
Right.
Or whatever. The meta is lousy with artifacts.
So it's a wonder.
We should all be running way more mass artifact removal.
Oh, absolutely.
If it's going to cost you a soul ring and one of your mana rocks, to clear your board and prevent you from casting the game-winning spell, then just do it.
Yeah.
What are you waiting on? It's not as though you have to run a deck that has no artifacts in it to run mass artifact removal. You can. It's just not that hard.
Yeah.
And you should. We should all be running way more artifact removal. I have been a big proponent of saying we need to run more enchantment removal, because enchantments seem to be seem to have been getting a free ride on the table. The only time they ever seem to get destroyed is when all permanents are destroyed. That's garbage. They need to go. But
especially with things like Smothering Tithe.
Right.
Because it's one thing if you destroy all artifacts. If the Smothering Tithe
is still there, by two turns later, you've got the same problem again. But
luckily, I can't run that in this.
Right. So it's just, how do you make this work?
Yeah.
So, and I think that for a group to manage your deck, you have to go after the source. And I'm not advocating anybody run mass land destruction.
Right.
But I am saying that a lot of decks, and the one we're describing is definitely one of them, where if you can take out all of the artifacts, well, nobody can complain.
Right. Because, it really is a matter of turning, say, treasure from the lotus petals that they are to actual physical lands. Like, it is...
Right.
It is that important in this deck where, getting rid of a treasure or any artifact does start to push back on the front line of this deck. And I think, even to an extent, just kind of making sure that Prismari doesn't stick for too long. It can sit around for a turn or two, but, as you start to see whoever the Prismari player is, in this case me, once you start to see me kind of really balloon up in artifacts, first thing that's got to go is my commander.
Well, and that if you get rid of the commander, well, now you have to sack the artifacts to get the commander back out on the battlefield.
Right.
Because if we can kill your commander even twice, then it's up to how much mana?
It starts as 4, so killing it twice, it's 8.
Right.
Doubled.
8. So you're probably burning up some of that treasure just to get it back onto the battlefield.
Yeah.
And really, that's what you're looking for. Because once it's on the battlefield and you're just tapping the treasure for mana, it's, to cast other spells.
Right.
So, yeah, you really want to, make it exorbitant. And, I'm not really a fan of constantly targeting my opponent's commanders. I do want to see them do the thing. I want,
right.
You want to see the deck interact and take part. But if you've got an opponent that can take you with one card, when these, when this situation, when this scenario is set up, well, then you can't let the scenario get set up if you can't deal with that one card.
Yeah, I mean, especially too, like it's nice to see a deck go off. It's nice to have a deck go off. But say I double, say I copy Brass's Bounty so that I get 2 times as many treasure for as many land as I have. Like, I'm instantly the threat, and I don't expect to not be. And I think with this deck, and I mean, I feel like I'm, I don't know, like I feel like whenever I bring this deck out, I'm expecting to be the V1. People start to like in early game threat assessment, you need somebody to get your chip-ins on. This deck needs to be that one.
Nobody wants to be like, oh, it's that deck? Thump, thump, thump.
Right.
Nobody. And when I say nobody, I mean our group.
Right.
Nobody wants to be, it's like, oh, okay, Andy's playing that. So then they go after you constantly and never let up. And, I'm not particularly a big fan of that either. But if that's what if that's how you have to be able to respond to it, then that's how you have to respond to it. I mean, if it means that the only effective way to manage is to get Andy's life total down to 10 or less, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah, especially where, like, this deck, it runs creatures, but, like, getting me down to 10 or less is an easy way for it to be like, all right, like, if he starts acting up, we'll go for him.
Right.
But I don't know, like, it's tough because, like, I know how many times I've failed with this deck, and I've also made a lot of adjustments since. And it's tough to not drag that early game section out to be like, oh, like, I'm not doing anything on board, when it's like I know that I'm building up to big mana, and then
there needs, with the rest of us, with most of the decks, adding the mana or playing a mana rock is still doing nothing.
Right.
There's nothing there, because they know that the next step has to be a creature on the board. Because that's how they're going to win. So if they don't have 5 creatures on the board lined up, then they're looking at you like, what are you doing? Clearly I've got nothing. But your deck doesn't have that step. Your deck has the step of, okay, look, I've got 3 mana rocks and my commander out, but that's it. It's like, okay, well, the commander in those 3 mana rocks means that your mana total is at like 10. That's a problem already.
Yeah.
So you just need to understand that. So I see by the time we should probably head for the break.
Yes.
And I think after the break you want to sort of look at ways to diversify.
Yes. I've got some things that I've already done to the deck to diversify a little, and we'll talk about those and potentiality when we get back.
Sounds
we'll
good.
Be right back.
This episode of Temple of the False Pod is brought to you by Mere Battlesphere, because sometimes you just want 5 artifacts. This episode of Temple of the False Pod is brought to you by Sharding Sphinx, because Sharding Sphinx.
Never gets old. We're back. Talking about my Prismari deck, kind of, but mostly just talking about how to dissect the idea of changing a deck to your meta, or at least how you play it. I don't know. It's a difficult topic today.
I think the first half of what we've talked about is more a case of how to deal with the deck, how to deal with a deck that is significantly diverges from your meta. In this case, we're talking about a deck that wins primarily through sorcery speed X spells in a meta that is very focused on creatures, which has significantly fewer ways to stop a sorcery or instant. So So for the second half, I think what we really wanted to look at was a deck that essentially wins the same way over and over again. And how do you spice that up?
Yeah.
How do you make that change? So, because I know, Andy, we had talked a little bit before the podcast and you were saying that you felt like the deck basically proceeds and wins the same way.
Yeah, it just kind of holds out until I have, Jaya's Illuminating Inferno or Crack with Power or any given, do big thing with, it's essentially now you have enough mana to win the game? Okay. It's the same thing you see with things like Exsanguinate or Debt to the Deathless, where it's you just need the card in hand and a lot of mana, and then you did it. And not to say that it's like a 2-card combo, because like we discussed, this deck needs all of the artifacts out. You need sometimes Prismari to be out too, at least if it does get countered. But essentially, it just kind of sometimes feels like I'm holding out or drawing to these specific cards to then play them, which can feel one note, and it's probably why I don't play the deck very often anymore. And one of the first things I did to change it after I had gotten the mana figured out was take out Karn's Temporal Sundering, which is 6 mana, legendary sorcery, so you need a legendary creature or planeswalker out. And it says for blue 4, essentially bounce target non-land permanent, target player takes extra turn. So the idea behind the deck was to copy that, because this deck, like I've said before, loves even to copy spells. It just wants to copy and copy and copy. Copy copies and then play those copies. And to make multiple copies of things like Karn's Temporal Sundering, or I think I had a Time Warp in there or something, you made extra turns. And then I realized if you're not doing anything with mana on during those turns, it just ends up being expensive card draw.
Right.
Very specific card draw.
Yeah.
And there are better ways to do that.
Right. Karn's Temporal Sundering is, if you're not doing anything else, it's bounce a permanent, draw a card. You're going to pay 6 mana for that, and it's a sorcery. I'm pretty confident you can find a better rate than that if that's all you're going to do with your extra turn. Right.
And obviously you get that 6 mana back, and you get if you've got things like Leyline Tyrant out, where you get to kind of bank that red mana, you can do that.
Yeah.
And it is more accessible. But your opponent still saw you take an extra turn, and some people have an issue with that.
Well, and it's interesting because, let's say you just get the 1 extra turn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, how much mana did you have on the table in the first turn? So if you've got 10 mana on the table, Karn's Temporal Sundering costs 6. So you have 4 mana left. Now, if you never play the extra turn spell, how much mana are you losing over those 2 turns? 4. You have 4 mana extra to play with. This is the extra part of the turn. You essentially added 4 mana. Okay, great. But is that it? And if you play the turn with Karn's Temporal Sundering because you're hoping to draw the card that will then allow you to use that 10 mana effectively, well, then essentially you just are playing a card. If you don't draw into that, what have you done? It's okay, great, I have 10 mana open. I am a blue deck, so maybe I got something going on. I can bluff something. But, the full effectiveness of getting the extra turn really fades, and you really do need to look at it. And when you realize that a lot of opponents don't care what you do in the extra turn or even how long it takes. They just know you took an extra turn.
Right.
And now they really hate you.
Yeah. So that was like the first thing I did. Especially
Right.
where I kind of built something kind of related to this on Arena. Did the Prismari thing of artifacts and big mana.
Right.
And it really showed me how much extra turns in this deck don't do. Like, if you're playing extra turn spells on curve, they're not doing anything. Like we were just talking about, they're not doing anything. So you want to play them with a lot of mana available. So I just kind of got rid of them because they're slow, essentially. They put the target on you even more.
They put the target on you, and to me, even when they're effective, they're a win more. I mean, most of the time, if you didn't play it, you probably could have played the kill spell that was going to win you the game anyway. Yes, you do draw the extra card, but again, it just play card draw. You're in blue. If that's what you're looking for, then just do that. It's far less, like I say, it doesn't paint the target on your back that way, like something that says take an extra turn.
Yeah.
So,
and it's tough because like past that, I don't know where to go with this deck. There are like certain things that I can do in terms of, I can copy spells, which is cool, but that takes up 6 or 7 slots in the deck. I have things like Trash for Treasure, which brings an artifact out from the graveyard to the battlefield, which is cool. But if you look at the artifacts in my deck, only some of them you'd really want to bring back out of the graveyard if somebody were to get rid of them. Like, you're really relying on Treasure, which once they hit the graveyard, they just get exiled.
right. I mean, you do have a number of artifacts that you do want to have come back, but this is not a deck that's looking for a ton of recursion.
Right.
I mean, even your X spells that you cast, I don't know that you're necessarily looking to pull them back out of the graveyard. You're more likely wanting to just double them or increase the power or do something like that when they're initially cast, as opposed to looking to cast them again in a turn by getting them back out of your graveyard.
Yeah, and mostly it's a matter of trying to get the deed done with it. And so, like, I'm trying to figure out a way to make there a variety of ways to go about doing deck. And I don't know. Like we were talking before the recording. Maybe we should stop doing that and just record that instead. But, like, I was saying that I had an issue with just always running with Crackle Power. And the inverse is that I could do a token strategy where I put all my mana into making a bunch of tokens and then waiting a turn to attack. And, as much as we are about de-optimizing or playing unoptimized ways, that is literally just asking to be dealt with. Like it is, I don't know. Like,
it's just not what this deck is aiming for. When you have an obvious card that does this, and you intentionally choose a card that's going to take your win at least a turn longer, and it's there solely to make it easier for your opponents to deal with, it doesn't. That part doesn't make a lot of sense. So I get that. I mean, you are talking to somebody whose Grenzo deck was, for the longest time, simply a way to keep churning until you hit Grey Merchant. Because Grey Merchant of Asphodel was just the win condition for the deck, and it just kept going to it again and again and again. Now, I've managed to alter that and run with other cards that, do cool things and have a little variety, and it works out. But so have you? What sort of ideas do you have? Have you started doing this, or is this something that's more still a thought?
It's still kind of a thought, just because I haven't played the deck in a while.
Sure.
But a lot of it is coming out in the way that I want to... I kind of want to focus on what cards in the deck I like the effect of that aren't doing anything. For instance, Trash for Treasure, as I said. Brutaclad I've got in the deck, but I'm creating a token each turn, and that's about it. Like, I'm not doing anything cool with those tokens.
Right.
So, like, maybe focusing some of the other game plan options toward Brutaclad or Wizard Spellbook. Like, I was explaining this card before, and I kept thinking about, like, okay, what does that want to do? Granted, Wizard Spellbook can exile it out of other people's graveyards. Very cool.
Right.
But for 7 mana, you're essentially exiling things that copy spells. And that is less exciting. And so I'm thinking of taking out some of the copy spells, but I don't want to get rid of all of the character that this deck has in that aspect. So I'm like, I want to replace them with interesting spells. Not to say that copying spells isn't interesting, but it's been done. And I don't know, and I mean, this is kind of more of a meta thing of our meta doesn't play too many wacky, big, goofy instants and sorceries. Because, I mean, like you said, we're creature-based for the most part.
Well, I mean, is that another option? I mean, Crackle with Power, sure, it's an X spell, but, is there another 10 mana sorcery or 8 mana sorcery you want to run? And I'm not necessarily saying expropriate, but there are plenty of other large, significantly expensive spells that you get to do now because you have, because you've created the situation. So, I mean, just trying it in that angle, because, like I said, I mean, I don't know that you necessarily want to play something that gives you X creatures.
Right.
Because that's not what the deck does. It's the focus on the sorceries and the instants, so, go after those.
And I'd love to, along the same lines with Wizard Spellbook, figure out a way to make things like Ifrit Flame Painter work, where it's a 1/4 for 4 with double strike, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast instant or sorcery from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If you cast it, if a spell would be put into your graveyard, exile instead. So it's like, that's hard to do, where most of the spells either just copy things or are X dependent. I mean, the same thing with Mind's Desire. You whiff when you're dealing with mostly just X spells, and I want to get away from the you have enough mana to win, so pay mana and win game. I want to get away from that and get into more of turn dependent, specific dependent, or turn specific spell, where I'm just like, all right, like, I've got 5 spells in my hand, I need to figure out which one wins me the game, rather than like, oh, this one has big X on it.
Right.
Not to say that, like, that isn't fun, because I've done it and it is a lot of fun, but it gets boring after a bit, and I can say I've done it,
Right. So, I mean, my thought, I went looking.
Mm-hmm.
Something like Clone Legion.
Is it blue?
It's blue. Cost 9. It's 7, 2 blue. For each creature target player controls, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Now, I just finished saying you don't want to do an X spell that creates a bunch of token creatures, but this is different.
Especially if you're like, you want an opponent to have a big enough board state.
Right.
You don't want to just...
Right. So it's responding to your opponent. It's creating that sort of scenario.
I also eventually want to get that Hellkite Tyrant win, where I just have 20 artifacts at the beginning of my upkeep.
There's Enter the Infinite. 8 blue. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your library. Then put a card from your hand on top of your library. You have no maximum hand size until your next turn. So you get to keep them all in hand until your next turn. You draw the last card. You better win.
Yeah. Damn.
But I mean, you can, these are, and I'm not saying you want to build your deck around any one of these. Just, all sorts of options. I mean, there aren't too many, but there's options out there, but just to try and add the variable to it. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, the other option is to you can always try and turn it into some sort of storm variant. Because if you have that much mana, if you stop looking at the massive X-Spell and just with the idea of draw a ton of cards, cast something cheap to draw more cards, to cast something cheap to draw more cards, to cast something cheap, and churn the storm count up, and then hitting whatever storm spell you want to use. I mean, that's certainly another option, and it's not as though that's an option that would remove some of the Crackle with Power. You can certainly do both.
I think especially where I just came across Soulfire Eruption. 6 red. Choose any number of target creatures, planeswalkers, or players. I have this in my my Lelia deck.
Mm-hmm.
For each of them, exile top card of your library. Then Soulfire Eruption deals damage equal to that card's converted mana cost to that permanent or player. You may play it until the end of your next turn.
Right.
So if there are a lot of targets, then great.
Right, and you're hitting all these cards, and then on your next turn, you're going to be able to cast likely several of them, or at least you may end up hitting another high mana cost card, doing significant damage with that one, and then being able to cast it for the next turn.
And I think too that card may be my signpost of I want the deck to start doing these things.
Right.
High mana cost, whether it's sorcery, instant, or even creature or artifact at this point. And then, obviously, the instant or sorcery type things that the deck wants to do. But, look at high CMCs. Or, for new players, mana value. But, I mean, I think we're going to have probably more of these types of episodes going forward where we look at a deck that we're not necessarily hugely satisfied with, and we have probably had a deck tale about it, and then we'll talk about where we want to go with the deck dependent on our meta, on how we feel about, maybe we'll just decide, what, we've had enough with the deck, let's move on to something new with either the keeping the same commander or throwing away, getting a new one.
Yeah, I mean, I already have the next deck in mind for this one. So,
but I think we've got a lot of mileage on this, and it's gotten me excited about this deck again. Is the thing.
Right?
I love that. So I'm gonna go tool with it. I'm gonna go figure out how to make it do deck even more. So next week we've got Temple's Treasures. We're talking about sorceries of a color. We've done.
Started with green.
We did green. We did black. I think.
We do white.
No. So we'll be back next week with white sorceries. Almost said enchantments. White sorceries for Temple's Treasures. So get excited for that. Finding out some new curious cards that people haven't seen for years. Make your opponents go, wait, hold on. What does that do? Those are the best cards in Magic. Best thing to hear while playing a game of Magic. Hold on, what?
Yeah, back up.
So, thank you so much for hanging out tonight. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week, of course. We're Temple of Falsepod. Our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
Thank you again for listening. I'm going to say thank you 10 more times by the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. And may your fifth land be the temple.
Bye!
Thank you. Thank you. Wait. Before you go, I just wanted to say thank you for listening. You can reach out to us via email at falsepodmtg@gmail.com or on Twitter @falsepodmtg. Bruce is @manaburned, and I'm @AndyWeekend, though you'll definitely notice I use the podcast Twitter far more often. Now that we've got you here, make sure you subscribe, rate us on whatever podcast platform you use. It helps us out. It gets us more reach. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Like a video there. Leave some comments for more casual enjoyment. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with some more timeless discussions about all things casual. So come hang out, and may your fifth land be the temple. Bye-bye. Should I do my best, Bruce? Bye!